and social justice for nearly a decade. So I'm really excited to discuss some of the most important issues in and around sports today. During this conversation, we will hear from experts and trailblazers in the sports diversity, equity, inclusion space. For this first session, we will be discussing allyship in action. So in a few minutes, we're going to introduce our amazing speakers for this first session. But before we get started, I want to make a couple of points. First, while we will be recording this call, today's call is an off-the-record community call and not intended to be a media update. If you're a journalist, you're welcome to stay on in your personal capacity, but for official inquiries, please reach out and we'll be happy to get you to the right person. Next, Susie and Liam will be our room facilitators. They will be monitoring live Q&A and handling any tech questions you might have. And then also just one last quick housekeeping point of order. On the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A box to submit your questions. If you have any questions you want answered throughout the webinar, please put them in there and we'll be happy to answer them throughout the discussion. So we want this to be an organic discussion. We do have some prepared questions for the panelists, but we will be looking in the Q&A to make sure we can answer your questions in a timely manner too. So now I'd like to briefly introduce the panelists for our Allyship in Action session. First, we have Katie Brim.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm with US Paracycling and Team Novo Nordisk. I've been a part of cycling for about 5 years now. And it's been, a huge part of my life since my injury and just even like becoming into adulthood. And so I'm really excited to be a part of this panel.
Great, happy to have you. Next, we have Tina Weaver.
Hi, everyone. Excited to spend some time with you today. My name is Tina. Pronouns are she and they. I serve as the executive director of the Out Foundation. Our mission in just short is we're here to break down the barriers that block the LGBTQ plus community from safe and welcoming access to the fitness, health, and wellness spaces. Hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that today, but thanks so much for having us, Ashland and Susie, and we look forward to having more conversation.
And next, Milt.
Hi, yes, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Milt Sharp. Pronouns are he and him. I am what I often refer to as a social architect and working in the community around community economic and development as a profession, but more specifically in working with organizations that are looking at creating opportunities for more people of color to get engaged in mountain biking, gravel riding, and overall cycling. And looking forward to today's conversations and discussions.
All right, so let's just jump right in. I'm going to start this conversation or this question with Katie, but I'm going to ask all of you the same question. Can each of you start off by telling us a little bit more about who you are, how you engage with building more diverse communities and spaces in sports?
So yes, I have been part of adaptive cycling for, like I said, about 5 years now. In 2017, I sustained a spinal cord injury that left me paralyzed. And for me, a huge part of overcoming the injury and learning how to live with this new life in many ways was through adaptive sports. And I was very fortunate that where I was at the time was Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we have the rehabilitation hospital there called Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation. And their whole mission behind their rehab is to get individuals back to doing what they like to do, whether that's within their community, whether that's with sports, church, you name it, that's their mission. And whatever that looks like, they're going to get them back to doing that. And that can be a really hard thing to overcome after sustaining like traumatic injuries. And it was definitely a huge part of my recovery for me. It was, like I said, being introduced to adaptive sports. I personally started at the very recreational club level with Mary Free Bed for both hand cycling and wheelchair rugby. But then after enough people egging me on to try out the side of racing, I finally started picking up on the racing, and now I'm actually racing internationally for Team USA quite often. And I think a big part of that has just been because of advocacy around like, hey, you should try this, let's do this, there's this event. And so since me starting, it has kind of turned into this mission of like, how do we do this, nationwide? Because there are many locations that we have that do not have good rehab programs like Mary Free Bed, or do not have access to things, programs and equipment to create accessibility opportunities for people to get involved with adaptive sports, hand cycling, wheelchair rugby, basketball, all that stuff. Yeah.
Wow, you do a lot. Thank you. Next, Tina, same question. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you engage in building more inclusive spaces in sports.
Yeah. Well, I think that, at the point that I'm at in my life, this is really a full circle moment, folks. As a kiddo, I did not fit the societal norm of what a young, at that time, female needed to look, play, sound, and operate like on whatever athletic space I was on. I was often chased out of restrooms just because I didn't look like my peers, and often told, where's your birth certificate? Because we don't believe that you're competing in the right league, right? So that was my experience as a child. And that continued on into, even as a college coach, a lot of just challenges, a lot of barriers, playing college ball, when we think about authenticity. So when we think this journey that I've been through, it's been very much so ingrained in my DNA that I wasn't supposed to be in these spaces. It was something that I had to climb out of. And understanding this full circle moment today is that I deserve to be in every single one of these spaces. And when we're creating these inclusive environments, we have to think 25, 30 years back of where we had so much inequality between males and female sports, and even to this day. But when you talk about inclusion equates to opportunity and accessibility. And when we can create those spaces, specifically with the ALF Foundation, we do a lot of education and learning across the fitness modalities in this nation, in which we provide cultural competency that folks can, again, peel back those layers of what we've been ingrained into societal norms to believe this is where things have to fit. It's a square box with a square peg. That's what happens. No, we're not all square pegs, right? So we have to be able to work with a level of adaptability in how we serve inclusion. I do believe that inclusion is an ever-evolving space. Again, the challenges that we saw 30 years ago have evolved. Now we have a whole nother set of challenges to where we have to continue to practice inclusion for all, because at the end of the day, sport is a conduit of health. And if we can break down those social determinants of health, we're a better society. Thank you.
Thank you. And Milt, same question to you.
Wow, I have to go after that. That was pretty amazing, both of you all. But I will share, again, my introduction and into this space. Cycling has been something I've always engaged in lifelong. And I've always enjoyed riding my bicycle. It was, for many of us, when you ask them about, cycling, and when they first started cycling, it always puts a smile on their face, because many of us, it brings us and puts us to a happy space. I've always wanted to share that more broadly with folks. And in doing that, by trade, I mentioned I was a community economic development practitioner. As a cyclist, and now seeing that there is this gap between folks who are out riding their bikes and people who are not riding their bikes, I felt that it would provide an opportunity to figure out how do we solve for that? What are the things that we can do? And one of those that I felt was experiences. And experiential education, I felt, would be a key way of being able to open up the door and show the love that I have for this sport to more folks. And so I began immediately to try to identify which organizations might be out there that I could either sign on with or be a part with. And my first introduction with that was with Major Taylor and the Major Taylor Cycling Associations. As I began to become more involved with more cyclists of color, and seeing that there still is this gap, because while I enjoy riding my bike, I really enjoy mountain biking and gravel riding. And when you start talking about the lack of diversity in cycling, it becomes thinner and thinner as you get into the more off-road riding and things. And so I saw that as an excellent opportunity to identify organizations that I could work with and assist and bring my executive ability that I have from community economic development to help them grow their organization so that we can touch more people and help bring more and transition more into this particular space. And so in doing that, I've signed on with 2 different boards where I've been able to now, again, bring my executive ability to help with growing these organizations. Because we know a lot of times people have that desire, they have that mission, but sometimes they don't have the executive ability to how you put it together. How do you grant fund? How do you bring in the resources to help grow this? And I saw that this is an excellent intersection because I'm able to bring something in that I'm very passionate about and have had a direct experience about how it's been able to transform my life. And now I'm able to bring it to organizations and help them to bring that message out more broadly to more people.
All right, Milt, we're going to stick with you for the next question. As a Black person who loves to ride bikes, I love your organization. I want to know just a little bit more about what led you to start the organization and how the work has changed over time.
Right. So Black People Ride Bikes was founded by Dr. Nia Reed Jones and Shaka Pitts, both out of Baltimore. And they created it as a means and a mechanism of being able to bring beginners into this space. When I found them through social media during the pandemic, I reached out to them and said, hey, you know, I'm looking at you guys' mission. I'm looking at the work you're doing. It sounds pretty awesome. I would love it if you would allow me to volunteer and be a part of the work that you're doing. In getting with them, I then realized that they could be a bit more structured and set up. And so I work with them to achieve their 501c3 and become a nonprofit organization, and then assisted them in being able to go out and identify different grants, taking it through the process of understanding, you know, we can be passionate about this, but let's set some goals and let's set some things so we can show where we've moved the needle, you know, to show where we've been able to make a change through the work that we've done. So we identified 3 particular areas that we wanted to work in. One was, as I mentioned earlier, around experiential education. And we felt that being able to reach out to the youth and doing work centered around working with the youth was one of the ways of being able to do that. In doing that, we were able to help establish 2 youth mountain biking teams in the Baltimore city that compete as a part of the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, or NICA's league, MICL, or the Maryland Interscholastic Cycling League. That's there. One group is an all-boys team and the other is an all-girls team. And we've been able, through the last 3 years, to support them in their growth and development. And in doing that, we see how it's been able to transform other areas of their life, such as their health and wellness, their mental and emotional states, as well as their contribution through community service in their community. The other was to look at also just health and wellness overall and the exploration that bike is able to do. And many of the families and individuals in Baltimore, you know, sometimes are challenged to get around the city and identify. So we were able to create safe routes for them to be able to ride their bikes to different places throughout the city so that they can see the benefits of that. Through doing that, it created an opportunity to create relationships with organizations like Rails to Trail, where we're promoting the development of the Greenway as a way of now having a bicycle transportation system to move folks possibly through the city faster than most folks can get through it on their vehicles. And then the last was, again, creating community opportunities to bring the entire ecosystem around cycling together, where we do an annual event in one of the parks there in Baltimore, where we're able to bring in all of the different folks who are in, such as bicycle shops and other bicycle clubs and other advocacy organization, health and wellness checks and things that can all be done for cyclovia that we do in the park annually. All of this centered around helping to raise the awareness of this work that we're doing and the love and benefit that we have of what cycling can bring into people's lives.
No, I love what you said about like access and opportunity. Tina, this is something that you mentioned as well. So this next question is going to be for you. Say a little bit more about the Out Foundation, and also, you know, that how you work to craft more inclusive spaces for LGBTQ people. And then can you share a little bit about the work and tips that you would give gyms to help them better serve the LGBTQ athletes?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So again, the Out Foundation is here to break down the barriers that block the queer community from access to safe and welcoming. That's the key word, safe and welcoming fitness, health, and wellness spaces. That's our mission. So how do we do that? So we're working with hundreds of health and wellness spaces across the nation and a couple internationally. But what we do is what we call it a journey. We're going to assess it. Where's your current level of inclusion? And this is modeled after the HRC's inclusion index, but really formatted to fit that of the fitness industry. From there, we're going to be able to identify if you're level 1 through 3. Level 1, you're a starter. Level 3, you're doing rock star status stuff, right? So we want to get everyone to that level 3. Majority of folks kind of land in that level 2 zone. Now, what does that mean? That means we're going to put you on a curriculum track that's self-led by the OUT Foundation and what we call OUT ambassadors. These are subject matter experts that are former professional, current professional athletes in their respective fields. So they really can give you not just even real life example, but even their professional examples, and they're profoundly been educated in these spaces to be leading these conversations. So again, an assessment, we're going to do a curriculum, and throughout the year, we provide mentorship and guidance to these spaces because we know things are popping up, right? We're on a learning journey. One of our core values at the OUT Foundation is learning, because we can't say that we know everything, but we are advancing ourselves every single day. And we encourage you all to do the same. So we'll provide mentorship and guidance. We'll provide collateral during certain LGBTQ events throughout the year, important dates, and then we'll do an audit. Because for us, at the end of the year, that audit's really assuring that you're remaining compliant in your space. And we're ultimately responsible. We're saying, hey, this location is an inclusive space. You can go there. And we want to make sure that we keep that. Now, Ashland, your second part of your question was more on that allyship piece, right? So, folks, let's pull that back a little bit. When we think about allyship, you've got to center the voice in the position of that marginalized group that's in front of you. And when we think about centering it, that's voice, that's your resources, that's your support. And it's allowing that subset population to kind of have this space so that they may thrive. We're never self-proclaimed allies. When we're an ally, we earn that from the groups that we're working with. I'm an aspiring ally for every population that I am not identified with. And I want to gain that from those populations. But when we think about it, allyship is belonging. And how we can get there, again, this was part of the start of this conversation, is when we can rewind the clock 50 years, even 60 years, wealth was a determining factor within sport. If you were a person of wealth, that's where you had the opportunity to thrive in sport. Then advance a little bit more, it became a racial discussion. We saw our folks of color, especially our Black community, start participating in sport, and we saw such a pushback on that, right? There was such a we don't want Blacks to participate in our sports. That was an evolution. That was a time where we were creating spaces, and now it's blossoming. We still have challenges, mind you. And then it became a gender discussion. And to this day, it's still a gender discussion. But back in the 80s, you saw so many inequities from our male to female participants. So what does allyship look within that? Historically, wealth was a challenge, race, continuance of that, but also gender. All three of these things were barriers in that time, but we needed folks that were participating at those levels to create space and center opportunity for us to participate. So it is a long-standing journey. To this day, wealth is still a profound occupants of that. I call it the pie, and the pie is massive. There's so much space for everyone to have a slice of it. But right now, we continue to see these challenges. So as an ally, I implore you to be thinking about centering. Centering is your voice for the community you're trying to strive to be an ally with. It's your resources. It's your support. It's how we can continue to drive a more inclusive atmosphere for the individuals to participate in sport. Allyship is going to be a journey. And let's just keep in mind, it's not self-proclaimed. It is something that's earned from the other groups that you're working with.
Yeah, and it's not just a stagnant title. You have to be an active ally.
That's right.
So I like that, what you're saying about being a journey, like what allyship looks like, yesterday, it might look different in 2 weeks. It's just depending on the needs of the community that you're trying to be an ally to.
Yeah, we see a lot of it getting turned back on its head right now,
Yeah.
and And I think that it is an evolution. It is a journey. All of this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but we know that we have incredible allies that are working for a stronger space for all.
Katie, Kate, haven't forgot about you. Have a big question for you. Like, you know, I don't know, past, let's say 4 to 5 years, a lot of the DEI discussion in sports has been around gender, has been about race, has been about sexual orientation. And we are seeing more conversations around accessibility. So you've been an amazing role model and advocate for greater accessibility in cycling. So can you share some of what your organizations can do to be better to support athletes with disabilities of varied health issues and statuses?
So yeah, that was a great question that I saw within the panel questions. I think so. One of the big things that we see amongst people with disabilities is a little bit of just naturally developed fear around trying new things due to their disabilities. And that even was the case for me. I have a pretty high level spinal cord injury that comes with a couple of pretty dangerous side effects with it. One of them being heat exhaustion. I'm very susceptible to it because I do not sweat. And so it's really hard to regulate my body temperature. That being said, you know, thankfully I've had a lot of great education around it, how to manage it and stuff. But getting understanding to events and stuff of like, hey, if this person has a medical condition, how can we help you best? So recently in the last couple of years, what that's looked like in a couple of cases has been amongst registration for people's events is simply like a box of like, hey, do you have any like allergies, medical conditions, or anything that we should know about in case something does happen. Because of me dealing with like the heat exhaustion risk, and then I'm also type 1 diabetic, so I have risk of low blood sugar and really high blood sugars also when I'm racing. And that's been a huge weight off my shoulders, knowing, okay, I'm going to do this event and there are people aware of my conditions, where sometimes we go into events and we're just like, if something happens, do they know what autonomic dysreflexia is or how to treat a low blood sugar? So that very simple thing. And then also, you know, going back to like just the general like broadness of accessibility within events is just, you know, creating opportunity for people with disabilities to be able to do their events. We're starting to see that more. You know, USA Cycling has been hosting our national championships alongside some of the other categories, which has been really cool to see. You know, the disability side is getting to see the able-bodied side, and the able-bodied side is getting to see the disability side of the sport. It's been awesome. We have even seen that starting at the UCI level for world championships. They're starting to combine events, which is also creating, you know, just more visibility amongst the whole community, both on the able-bodied side and the disability side. But yeah, I think a big step one is just like creating comfort for the disabled individuals around like, hey, you know, like we want you to be a part of our event. What are the needs that you have, and what solution can we come up with to be able to help you best suit your needs? And that can even come outside of like the medical thing, you know, as far as like accessibility to like get to the event, like, hey, do you guys have accessible porta potties and stuff, accessible parking, able areas to be able to set up. Something big amongst the marathons, like Grand Rapids Marathon and Boston, is they've created specific staging areas for the disability categories to be able to set up their equipment. Because as you guys know, like all the big marathons, they can be an absolute zoo to manage, no matter who you are, disabled or not. And so like simple things like that, creating spaces for the disabled categories to be able to set up, hey, come to this parking lot at this time. Registration is going to be here. There's going to be a specific tent for you guys to be able to get access to it, because that's another thing that we see is some of these events that occasionally are like, oh yeah, we'd love to have you have a category for hand cycles or racing wheelchairs. But then they get to the event and they can't even access it because there's not accessible parking, or there's not accessible bathrooms, or you can't even get onto the course. And so just awareness around all that. It's come a long way, but it's just, yeah, like I said, bringing that awareness to those simple things of accessibility around people's medical conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is huge, what you're talking about, in terms of like small steps and large steps, because a lot of times we work with organizations and it's around like physical access to sports. We'll get pushback where they're like, we don't have the money to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, actually, some of these things aren't big money things. Like, have
Exactly.
something on your survey, like just show some basic awareness, or have someone sitting at the table who might know what type of things to look for. So it's great to just reinforce that it's all not just big money issues. Some of it is just
Yeah.
simple awareness.
Yep. And yeah, a lot of that for me, I have been very open about my conditions and my needs. And almost every single time I bring up my needs, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. I'm glad you brought that up. And so creating that space for people to bring it up, because unfortunately, all of us have probably had times where we're afraid to bring up our concerns or our needs because of just the hecticness of the event that we're going to. So something as simple as, yeah, having that question available amongst registration, or just having a Q&A person at registration, at the event days, things like that.
Thank you. All right, coming back to you, Milt. So I'd love to hear more about some of the ways you've seen organizations best be allies to people of color in the cyclist space. And are there any standout examples that you've seen that make cycling more inclusive for BIPOC people, and gets more people connected to the sport and riding bikes altogether?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And, interesting enough, when I looked at it, I had immediately maybe 4 or 5 examples that have popped up, which I thought was really good because, quite frankly, a few years ago, I might not have been able to have as many examples as come up. So it appears that the needle is moving in a really good direction. And I think that some of the things that I've seen that have helped to contribute that, and one of those examples would be a group that I've been coaching now, Melanin Base Miles, which is a BIPOC cyclist group that was created to help remove the barriers around gravel cycling and racing in the Mid Atlantic region. Their president has done a really good job of elevating them through their awareness through social media. And in doing that, has also begun to identify events that they would like to attend. And in identifying those events that they would like to attend, Sheila has reached out directly. Sheila's their president has reached out directly to race events and directors, and has indicated that we have a group that we would like to bring to the event. And so in many instances and cases, her decision to determine which events that she would like to go to and the group have gone to have been based on how those events have been promoted, and events that have shown diversity through their marketing and through their outreach and through those who have participated. While it may not be a huge portion of them, they appear to be more open and welcoming, or at least inquisitive enough for groups to want to say, hey, we might want to go and we might want to do that. In doing that, we've also set up now an opportunity, particularly with 2 events that happen, where now they've waived registration fees for our folks to attend and to be there. And so that's helped an opportunity to kind of remove some of the angst. What we've found is that and I think this was mentioned earlier, the fear of the situation, right? And we talked about fear being as kind of a false evaluation about reality, right? That's kind of how we break it down, because after folks get into the experience and see it, becomes much more palatable. They have more confidence going into future events. And so now having the opportunities with these race events to be able to come, have tents welcoming, and have a space for folks to come to and to check in, creates a greater environment for them to feel more welcome. And that's done in relationship with race directors and promoters for these events. There are times when we've reached out to them. There are times when they've reached out to us. And so, I will use the example of the Minority Mountain Bikers, which is a group of, just as it sounds, minority mountain bikers. They do an annual event where they go into Bentonville for several days there at Bentonville. And the city of Bentonville had gotten word that they were coming out there, and the Visitors Bureau did a direct outreach to them and set them up to where they were able to identify hotels, bicycle rentals, and other things to help to reduce the cost of them being able to come and hold their event there in the city. Even so much as now providing opportunities for them to appear on local television for interviews, to promote and enhance the event as well. And that was done, again, through them attending there, the city being aware that these folks were coming there and doing a direct outreach to figure out how this would be a place that they would want to continue to come back. And so they'll be holding their 4th annual Minority Mountain Bikers Week there in September this year. I've had the pleasure of being able to attend one of them, and I'm looking forward to going back this year. What that has also done is, now that it's moved in kind of to its 4th year, is that it's also brought in other groups now who are wanting to tie their event in with that event. So, you know, it has set in motion so many things just through, again, those relationships and those partnerships, and that allyship, which is important in helping to grow awareness and increase access to so many folks.
Thank you. And Tina, I know you've already said, a little bit about the importance of allyship, but can you give an example of when, like, having a great relationship with an ally has helped you move one of your agendas forward?
So at the Al Foundation, we host activations year round. And I would say the majority of these activations are held by allies. These are folks that believe in the work that we do, believe in our mission, and want to see this advance. And I think what that looks like, it's definitely not a one size fits all, as I mentioned earlier, but what we have to consider is the entire alphabet mafia. Okay, so we're LGBTQ plus, right? That doesn't mean an ally says we're only for lesbians, or we're only for the bi community, we are only for the trans community, right? So it's not a pick and choose. What I encourage our folks that want to support our mission and see this advance is, when you are that true ally, you embrace our entire community. And right now, if we look at the most marginalized, that is our trans women of color that are on this march of survival. They're on this march of just trying to live life and have a level of thriving. And it is challenged by so much just in their day-to-day life, to what political actions may be taking that impact how they may have access to certain things. So all that being said, when we think about what allyship should look like, again, I don't think it's a one size fits all, but what we do need to take in consideration, and I implore everyone on this call to just understand, allyship is embracing the entire community. It's not selective by choice, because when you're selective by choice, then you're marginalizing and you're ostracizing a certain subset population. But I think, again, at the same time, we have to be on this learning journey to evolve to that. We may have a sibling or our barber or a friend of ours that's a musician, maybe queer. And because they're queer, we're donning, I'm an ally to that. Do we have to think about this ecosystem of the community? How do we really try to support and engage with, beyond our friendships, but the community at large? And I think ultimately for us and how we do work, it's engaging with our allies across the nation and internationally that see this mission driving forward, supporting them on their education journey, but ensuring that if they do have questions, we're a resource to them as well. It is a two-way street in this. And I think that a lot of it can be accomplished. We just have to have an open mind to understand we're lifelong learners.
Thank you. Kate, so as an athlete, what do you look for in a space when you're trying to get a sense of whether or not it's inclusive? And then what makes you feel welcome in a sports space? Like, what can listeners learn from this?
Yeah, so it's been interesting for me. I have very much so been a person of like, okay, this event was mentioned to me. What do I personally need to do to make sure my needs are covered? Which is something that we have, it's slowly growing, but just accessibility and like understanding around that of like, hey, sometimes right now, just where we are, it takes the individual themselves stepping up to say, hey, these are my needs. This is what I'm going to need. Can you fit that? And for me, I've seen it even racing, at the international level, getting my program of US paracycling to understand like, hey, this is my needs. How can we get these needs met? What do we got to do to create that? They've been very open about like fitting my needs and stuff, but had I not been open about that, my needs would have not been met. And so, like I said earlier, I think creating accessibility around people being able to bring up their concerns is a huge step in that, just because there's a lot of fear just individually amongst people of like, how do I speak up for myself, especially for people who have acquired injuries or disabilities that they weren't born with. It can be very intimidating. You know, all of a sudden you went from being a fully able-bodied person to now you're in a wheelchair or you're an amputee or you have a TBI, and you're like, wow, I am looking at the peers around me, and they're all completely normal. And I used to be one of those completely normal person, but I feel like this, you know, almost like the black sheep in the crew of white sheep. And so, yeah, I think a big part of it is creating accessibility to speak up. But me, it's been a huge thing to for like self advocacy to bring awareness to the organizations and the events that I'm joining. As far as like, you know, a lot of the events that I've shown up to, it's been a struggle, you know, seeing when I first show up, it can not feel welcoming at all or not accessible at all. But just having that communication with the organizers of like, hey, this is what I need, these are my needs. What can we do to make this situation work? Because believe me, I have definitely had some events where we've had to come up with creative ideas to make things work. And some people would look at it and be like, wow, this is not acceptable at all. But like in some ways, and all of us have experienced this, like sometimes we just have to deal with like the burden of an unfortunate situation to create awareness around it, to make it better for the next year. And so it's one of the things that I've looked at as far as me going into events of like, okay, sometimes I'm going to go to these events and they're not going to be the best experience, but what can I do as an athlete myself to like make this better for the future? A lot of the times, you know, we can get so caught up in like, oh man, I went to this event, this really sucked, this was really poor, I don't want to come back ever again. But like, it just comes around that advocacy to be like, okay, hey, this didn't work out so well, there wasn't really an accessible spot for us to be able to use the restroom or really an accessible spot for us to be able to stage and stuff. So what can we do better for the following years to make it better for people? And so, yeah, I think, you know, for the organizers themselves, sometimes even organizers themselves can just get frustrated and be like, wow, this really sucked. We really failed. And just like brush it off or completely get fear driven as far as like, I don't even know what to do. So like I said, just like creating accessibility around change. And then also just like, for me, it's been a lot of like just speaking up and saying, hey, this is my needs. I understand that this is like not a perfect situation, and creating accessibility around stuff has been an evolving matter over the years. And so, yeah, it's just been, I've had to be very public with everything as far as like, hey, this is really good. And even events that I've gone to where accessibility has been outstanding, I have been one to like praise it whenever I see it, because sometimes you go to events and they do an amazing job of creating accessibility, but people don't necessarily mention it. Sometimes people just go there and expect it and not create awareness around it. But like, we're just still in that time period of where accessibility is just not a general norm of general public. So it's also, yeah, like I said, creating praise around like, hey, this was awesome. I would love to see this repeated in the future. So as athletes themselves and as organizers themselves, like praising the good, questioning the bad, what can we do to improve it in the future? Yeah, you know, it's just having to keep that open mind with everything that we do, to continue to be able to create accessibility around everything has been a huge part of it for me. I've seen a lot of amazing change over the years that I've been a part of it all. And yeah, so.
Okay. And I'm going to kick this question to Milt and Tina. I'm just thinking like, as you know, a queer Black woman who has played sports, like what, in my mind, if I see something, I feel safe. Like it used to be like, you know, the safe space stickers. Now, if I see like a Black Lives Matters flag somewhere or a rainbow pride flag, I'm like, okay, this is at least a space where they want me to feel safe in it. What are some of those things that make you feel safe in like the spaces that you're working in? And I'll start with Milt.
So, of course, seeing others is a big part of that, right? So seeing other people of color. Interesting enough, music is one of those things, at events. When I hear music and I hear a diversity of music, I feel a little bit safer when I hear music that I might vibe to. And I tell event planners, you said, you'd be surprised of how something as simple as just having a playlist that would have a little bit more diversity in the playlist could be warming to folks. And when you're at a race and you've got everything else that you got to deal with just around being a race, to hear your jam come on gives you a little bit more, you feel a little bit more in the space and in the place that you're in. And then, this is, I guess, you think about just kind of food and what's available to eat, and the choices that you may have around some of those things. When there's food choices that make me feel like, oh, okay, and it doesn't have to be ethnic food. I would speak, even around vegans and others, just again, the diversity and the options of food. Those are things that help me feel, like the basic needs, like, hey, I see people that look like me. I feel comfortable because the vibe is supportive of that, whether it's through the marketing material or the music and other stuff. And then, can I get something to eat or drink? And I know it sounds very basic, but yeah, and it's
No, the
really an
playlist,
easy, simple thing to do.
the playlist is real.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
I can't agree with Milt even more because when everyone eats, everyone is included. That is a philosophy because I've gone to so many conferences. I'm vegan too, right, Milt? And when I go to conferences or meetings and no vegan options are there, I'm the one that looks odd. Why are you not eating? Well, there was nothing I could eat, right? So that's a very simple by design way in how we can create those spaces where folks feel more inclusive. The music genre, heck yeah, you hit it, Bill. I mean, we're vibing all day long with some ABBA or Gaga or something like that. We love to just move. But I think when we think a little bit more concrete, we want to see representation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a pride flag is just amazing. And that's like, if I see a pride flag in a gym, or I see maybe like a pride flag watch, or I don't know, some semblance of a rainbow, I'm immediately saying, okay, I've got my people want me here, right? And then even if it's not the rainbow flag, if it's the HRC quality flag, right? There's some synonymous in place there. And then I think a big one, because a lot of that can be very much so displayed, but what are folks' diversity statements? Do they have that displayed within their walls? Do they have gender neutral signage? I'm a non-binary person, so when we talk, I think Kate was hitting on it so well, accessibility to have a safe restroom experience, right? I want that for myself as well. We're past the times. We're all on an airplane. We all use gender neutral restrooms on an airplane. Let's keep that in mind. We're in our houses. Our homes are gender neutral restrooms, right? So I think that we just have to flip the switch and taking into consideration, we operate with these norms already. Now it's putting them into application in our work environments, in our gyms, in our cycle studios, whatever it may be. But I think for us in the queer community, there's a whole array of opportunity, and it would be for any really community to keep us perked up and interested. I can go there. I can be a part of that space.
Another question for Kate along the lines of Tina, you mentioned that you all kind of use like an index, maybe like an HRC quality index or your own index to kind of measure like how well someone's doing on LGBTQ issues. Kate, is there something similar when it comes to people do you rate events, like some events being more inclusive for people with accessibility issues or less? Is there something that people can actually like look at to see before they go to an event?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Okay.
And it's, I think, something that's, it's slowly growing. as far as accessibility around that, but it kind of goes back to that, you know, can we create more events where they can have those Q&A panels as far as like, hey, you know, do you have any specific needs that we can help you attain? And so, yeah, we have some events that we go to that are marked accessible, and then we get to the events and we're like, whoa, what is this? Um,
All right.
yeah, and then some events that like Boston Marathon, for instance, that are very, very heavy and as far as like their disability categories and saying, hey, this is where the disabled individuals can set up. This is good hotel options for disabled individuals. This is where the restrooms will be. Should you have an issue on the course, this is what you'll be looking for. So some events it's great, some events it's not. And then that just comes back to the whole like, as an athlete myself, I have to bring awareness to those situations when there isn't accessibility. And you know, it's for LGBTQ and Black individuals as well. I think it's the very same thing. It comes back to sometimes the persons themselves. If awareness around the issues is not brought up, it's never going to be solved. So, you know, right now we're seeing adaptive categories within sports and stuff growing, but some organizations and events might never know about it if it's never brought up. So like that's a huge step one, is just, you know, even for organizations themselves, that simple like, hey, you know, what are your needs? Do you have anything specific that we should be aware of? I think can be a huge step in the right direction as far as accessibility. So yeah.
Yeah, and that has to be tiring. I think like to always have to continually not just be involved in the sport and try to compete and win, but have to also take so much responsibility for your own well-being and inclusion in a space. And that's why we need allies. Like it is hard work, and we need people who maybe, you know, they aren't necessarily feeling the weight of it because they aren't members of the community, but they can take the weight off of your shoulders because of that too. And it sounds like probably, no, maybe do you have like an index or anything like that? Or is it word of mouth? Like if there's a bad event, people in the community will talk about it and know about it and just not go next year.
Yeah, no, it's word of mouth.
Okay.
We don't scorecard, if you will,
Yeah.
an event, but certainly, and again, I've mentioned social media more times than once here. You know, the stories will be told,
Yes.
and the testimonials will go live, and folks who are following and see and hear will know. But it also works to the benefit as well. I know for a fact that we sent several of our riders to Mid-South in Oklahoma for the big gravel ride there. And just through their social media, we've now gotten so many requests for folks to join our team. They want to know more about events that we're doing and how they can join us in the future. And that was because they shared that they had a good experience at the event. So it works both ways as well. When people have positive experiences, and I think Kate mentioned that earlier, just being able to point out when good happens, and then when it's not good, to look at how we can make it better or address it as well. And those provide opportunities for organizations like ours to reach out and say, hey, you know, we didn't have such a good experience, but we'd like to come back. Let's talk about how we can make it better next time.
And this next question was going to be focusing on barriers, but let's talk a little bit about like what would it take for you to take your work to the next level? So like maybe more of a positive spin on that question. Like, you know where you want your work to go, Milt. It sounds like I bet you have like a 3 to 5, 10-year plan. But like to take the work to the next level, what would you need from this audience? What would you need from the community at large? And let's start with Tina.
Trying to be courteous and put myself on mute. Sorry about that gap. So for us, I would say we have 3 major pillars of our work, and I've described a couple of them, and I'll just elaborate. Out health, it's all encompassing. We really want our queer community to thrive through fitness, health, and wellness. We have Out Athlete. This is a scholarship program for young LGBTQ plus folks. How do we get young queer individuals biking? How do they know that they can come into your clubs and know that it is a safe space for them because they love cycling or biking and they want to be a part of that, right? we provide scholarships to young queers so that they can have those opportunities to participate. But before we know that we can scholarship an athlete at a specific gym, this is what I would say, what would take our organization to the next level. I look at USA Cycling Clubs, and I think that we can support y'all with our education and curriculum. The program's called OUT-AIM, and it's an acronym for Out Athletic Inclusion Movement. Again, I've tapped in a little bit, but it is a full course curriculum that includes AFA and NASM CECs that are a part of it. So, you can garner that to continue your accreditation. But beyond it, it allows us to address these very identifiable places where improvement can happen. And it is a combined effort, because we know those levels of that evolution will be dictated upon that gym operator or club operator. But at the same time, what's going to lift our mission is how we can get into more spaces, how we can get into more clubs, and really bring light to what we consider some life-changing efforts in order to ensure our LGBTQ plus community is included. So in short, for anyone that's with this group or this call, OUT-AIM is the program. You'll get NASM and AFA accreditation, and then you'll also land on our Inclusive Fitness Finder map. We have a global map that has gyms on it that we have gone in, they've taken our assessment and we have identified them as an inclusive space. What a great marketing tool for you. We're talking about the business case and the mission case blended, but that's an opportunity to create more visibility in order for you to engage a subset population that has $3.9 trillion of purchasing power and is 4 times higher with brand loyalty when they feel included and welcomed. So if you're looking to increase memberships and increase your clients, the queer population is a great opportunity to serve both your business, but also your mission.
Thank you. All right, Milt?
To take it to the next level, I think there still needs to be uncomfortable conversations that look at and continue to address the isms. I like to refer to them as the elitism that still permeates through some of this, the racism that's still embedded in particularly the sexism. And while I think folks are comfortable with maybe what I refer to as seeing things like which you get with the diversity. Oh, there are more folks here, or the inclusion. Oh, there are more of them here. I'd like to see the needle move more on the equity side also. And I always say, diversity and inclusion, we can kind of see with our eyes, but equity, we can kind of fill in our pockets and things. And looking at how we can have those conversations where we can be a bit more equitable in this space, I think is what's going to help take us to the next level.
Okay. Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, I think, creating accessibility, like I mentioned earlier, something as simple as the Q&A, that's a huge step, making people feel welcome to bring up their concerns. But then also like the bigger picture for hand cycling, the average cost of a hand cycle at the very entry level is around anywhere from 10 to 13,000. And it can go all the way up to, my bike that I race in is well over $20,000. And so spaces to create awareness around grant opportunities that we currently have, but then also creating more grant opportunities for individuals, even just to get started, whether that be like a rent to ride program for individuals to be able to try this stuff out. And then also just, that space to be able to continue bringing awareness to the sports, because we have so many communities just within the US that they just do not have rehab hospitals. They sustain a spinal cord injury or a major amputation or a traumatic brain injury, and they get the bare minimum of care to, overcome these injuries and continue on with life. And they're given very harsh realities of what their life is going to look like. So just continuing to create those spaces to allow individuals to continue to be able to thrive, even after such injuries or, diagnoses is a huge part of it. Because, I myself, I was very fortunate to be at Mary Free Red Rehabilitation Hospital. But in the beginning, I was given very harsh realities of what my diagnosis was going to look like. I was told I was going to need care 24/7. My best outcome would be to live in a nursing home. And at the time, I was 19 years old. Being told at 19 years old, like, hey, your best outcome is going to be to live in a nursing home, that's a harsh reality to eat. And so, like, yeah, just as a step one, creating that awareness to like, nope, life is possible. It's going to be rough in the beginning, but like through, step by step and one day at a time, we can create just accessibility to like continue on with life. Whether like I said, whether that be through sport, your community, volunteering, going to church. So many of us in the beginning days of our injuries or diagnoses can feel like that's just not an option. And so just, yeah, creating awareness around that.
That so awareness, making sure that like people are being active allies. Also, people recognizing too that allyship does involve like how you spend your money too, where you
Yeah.
give grants to, and I know they're like giving people hope, extremely important. Creating space is extremely important. Also, people on the call, how you spend your money, extremely important, and where you give your grants, extremely important. Let's see, are there any questions? Let's see, I'm looking at Q&A. And if not, I can give each of you just, a few seconds if you have any like thoughts that you want to close out with. I think Tina, we might.
Yeah, I can start off real quick. Just, I understand that as a society, we're at a very challenging crossroads with our LGBTQ plus community. We see that, and it is a lot of difficult decisions. But I implore each of you just to be thinking about how we have evolved, and our trans community needs us. And it's not that we need them to be a part of every element that we're doing, but they need to feel welcomed, and they need to feel safe, and they need to know that they do have a place to belong. When we talk about DEI, DEI doesn't really execute on what belonging. That's where we really need to land on. So I implore each of you to be thinking about that. I know it's a challenging discussion, but here at the Al Foundation, we're here to support you. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate. We've been through it. We want this, and we know that we are in your corner as much as you may want to be in our corner.
Okay.
Yeah, like I mentioned, is just continuing to bring that awareness to accessibility amongst all communities. Just being open to like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I need. Creating that open space, and just, continuing to like be open to like the whole everyone is welcome, no matter what their circumstance, their income, their race, their gender identity, their disability. It's something that we've seen, especially amongst the disability community. We are a very small community, and yet there is still so much room for improvement amongst, the workspace, for employment, amongst sports, amongst just everyday life in the medical settings. So yeah, just continuing to work towards that open space for everyone in all communities.
Right. Milt, close this out.
And just real briefly, I would say many hands make light work. I feel that everyone should take responsibility themselves personally to figure out how they can help make this situation better. For race directors and club teams and things like that, ask yourself, why aren't these folks here? Or why aren't they at my event? And begin to start asking those kind of questions. There are folks out there who can give you those answers and can help you. But if you don't want to ask those questions, if it's not important to you, then it's not going to change. It has to start from kind of the inside out also. And when that's done, I feel like there's no real secret sauce to this. It comes from a place of love. And if more folks could operate and move from that space, we'd have a lot less challenges.
All right. Thank you all so much. I think we're going to have like a 5-minute break. Is that right, Susie?
Yep, so a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll get started with our second panel.
Again, thank you all.
Thank you, Ashland. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Tina. Thank you all. It was a wonderful panel. Thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for allowing me to contribute.
Thank you.